Okay, thanks, Grace. I got my title slide brought up on the screen, and I appreciate y'all being here and for the buffer rule session. Real brief breeze through. Next slide here, my forestry and buffer rules 101 and the role of the North Carolina Forest Service. The good news, as I think Sue pointed out earlier, forestry, when it comes to the buffer rules, is handled at the state level. So for those of you in local government, you don't have to worry about it. It's one less thing off your plate. But we wanted to kind of briefly highlight it just so you have the full complement of understanding all aspects of the buffer rules. DWR administers the buffer rules when it comes to the state level for forestry. We as the Forest Service are a partner in arms. We kind of walk arm in arm with them. Kind of the step one, again, handle the state. Step two, it's not delegated down. Step three, if you see a logging job in your county, you're not too sure what's going on, talk to the county forest ranger. We have an office that serves every county of the state. It's available through our website. That contact us. Some of our counties a few of our counties are combined, but otherwise we have a county, at least one county ranger. Most of our counties have an assistant ranger that serve every county in North Carolina. And it's their job to know what's going on in their county. As simple as that sounds, it's their job to know what's going on in terms of forestry, forest harvesting, forest planting, prescribed burning, timber that's being to be proposed for sale, and they do that through establishing their local networks. Our role as the North Carolina Forest Service when it comes to water quality in the big picture, it's the education and prevention and consultation before regulation. There are some rules that we inspect for compliance, the FPG rules I'll touch on at the back end. We do a lot of BMP monitoring and technical assistance, training, outreach, interagency collaboration, much like what we're doing today. So we have a pretty big role in looking at the water quality and erosion sediment control world when it comes to forestry practices in the state. We are the lead agency for that. We're not a regulatory agency. We are a service-oriented agency. We provide that technical assistance and that education. We do some monitoring and do some documentation, recording, some monitoring of inspection compliance. We don't enforce those rules. If there's an enforcement action needed, we will bring in the appropriate state enforcement agencies within DEQ to handle any potential enforcement actions. We are, quite literally the boots on the ground. Like I said, we've got offices in every county, and one of our high priorities is to look at forestry operations as they're ongoing. There are a lot of rules, a lot of laws that related to water quality that govern forestry practices. The Sedimentation Pollution Control Act, which gives birth to the FPGs. There are some state laws prohibiting obstructions. We have the buffer rules. There are some federal requirements for operating wetlands. And then we have our BMPs, our non-regulatory best management practices that are the tools in the toolbox as we characterize them. As we do logger training workshops and we train foresters, we say, okay, gang, here's what the rules require, the baseline standards. Now, how can you achieve compliance with those rules? Well, here's the BMPs. Here's the best management practices that you can pick and choose to apply on your sites as needed. And one comment also I'll make is that the forest industry has largely institutionalized the use of BMPs through the private sector. There are forest certification programs where all of the big paper companies, lumber companies, timber companies subscribe and participate in one of those programs, and they pledge to provide environmental sustainability goals. It's a private program. We don't run it through the state. Government doesn't run it. It's an industry supported programs, and they pledge to use BMPs in their states. So really the industry has kind of adopted the use of BMPs onto itself. And then we provide recurring monitoring, kind of give a snapshot of how we're seeing that BMP performance. Drilling down to the buffer rules, our role, again, as the North Carolina Forest Service, we can do stream determinations upon request from our customers on forestry sites. We don't do them on development sites or ag fields. It's got to be a forestry site. It has to be a registered forester, and they have to be certified through the SWITC process, the Surface Water Identification and Training Certification process. that is run cooperatively from DWR and NC State. When we're doing our routine forest water quality inspections, we will observe the buffer rule zone area. And if we observe what we think might be an apparent violation, we take some pictures, prepare some documents, and then we'll review that internally, and then we'll make a notification to Division of Water Resources, at which time DWR will then contact the parties, go out, make that compliance determination, and then if they need to do some follow-up actions, they'll take those follow-up actions. So we're a little bit, as one of our foresters likes to say, we're a little bit like the hall monitor. We're out there kind of observing what's going on with the buffer rules. We're providing that technical assistance. We're doing stream identifications. But if we do see something, we'll document it and again, notify the proper authorities, in which case is Division of Water Resources. Forestry under the buffer rules, it's not considered in a prior existing use. Technically, it's not, but no prior approval is needed, and no offsite, offsetting mitigation is required. But there are forest harvest requirements in each of the buffer rules, and they are very, very detailed as to what practices are allowed, what is not allowed, what size of trees can be harvested, where within the buffer rule the trees can be harvested. To harvest trees from zone 1, the tract has some eligibility requirements associated with it. There is some selective harvesting allowed. This is what we like to see here. This photograph here, this is an example of a forestry tract that has selective harvesting within the buffer rule zones, minimizing disturbance to the ground cover. It was clearly marked with some paint, so the logger knew, okay, here's where we need to stop and take extra precautions. You see that flush of green growth coming back up after a few trees were kind of plucked out to allow that landowner to recoup some of their financial investment. We've got a set of leaflets as our primary tool to communicate the buffer forest harvest requirements of the buffer rules. An example here, we've got them on our website. And this photo here just shows the Neuse River buffer rule that was implemented on a study site that we participated in up in Durham County. Going back to the big picture again, we have these state rules called FPGs, the Forest Practices Guidelines. They are part of the Sedimentation Pollution Control Act. They apply statewide. There are 9 narrative performance standards. They apply in all forestry sites. We are the lead agency. We're doing, about 3,000 to 4,000 site inspections every year, and we're doing about another 2,000 to 3,000 follow-up re-inspections every year on an annual basis. So we're seeing a lot of logging activities across the state. We do that annually. We're hitting again about 3,000 to 4,000 across the state. But again, enforcement remains vested with DEQ, or if we see a potential pesticide problem, that goes through the Department of Agriculture. The thing about the FPGs are there are several topics that are addressed through the FPGs. One of them is a requirement of a streamside management zone, or SMZ. That's a term foresters use for stream buffer. The FPGs were enacted in 1990. They've been around for a while. In forestry, we've been doing stream buffers before stream buffers were cool. We just call them something different. They're called streamside management zones. Through our FPG rules, timber harvesting is allowed, but there have to be erosion sediment control measures implemented. There has to be ground cover maintained. There has to be shade provided along perennial streams to prevent temperature fluctuations. There has to be obstructions. You're not allowed to obstruct the stream flow. The stream banks have to be stable. So like I said, we've got multiple sets of rules that apply to forestry. We have the FPGs, and then we have, in certain places, these buffer rules. One does not take the place of another. Both sets of rules have to apply if that stream is subject to that rule. And that's another key thing with our FPG rules. They apply to any intermittent stream and any perennial stream. Whereas the buffer rules, you have to look them up on a map, and then you have to determine on site, is it or is it not, match up with what the map says. So just a real brief snapshot, comparing one versus the other. For those of you, again, local government, get to know your county forest ranger. They can assist you with any kind of questions that people come to you about forestry. For those of you maybe working in private sector as consultants, I would encourage you to work with your clients. If they are, entitling land for development purposes, I would encourage you to go through that proper entitlement process and not try to either intentionally or inadvertently circumvent, certain aspects of the entitlement process by claiming it's forestry one day, and then the next day saying, well, no, we're actually going to develop it now. That puts us as the Forest Service in a real difficult situation of trying to ascertain what's going on. So, just get to know the Forest Service folks in your county. We've got an abundance of information on our website. Through our water quality section, we have all of our leaflets and contacts in a section of frequently asked questions about logging, how we do our inspection process. Our best management practices is also available on our website in a quarterly newsletter. So that's a real brief breeze through, and I'll stay here through the question and answer period if anybody has any questions.